Captain Sarah Chen of the cargo freighter Lucky Break was having the worst day of her career. Her ship's navigation computer had just crashed in the middle of a routine cargo run, leaving her backup systems to calculate an emergency exit from hyperspace. As she stared at the blinking warning lights on her console, she couldn't possibly know that her upcoming navigational disaster would change the course of human history. The Lucky Break shuddered violently as it dropped out of hyperspace. Sarah's hands flew across the controls, trying to stabilize the ship as it tumbled through normal space. Through the view screen, she caught glimpses of sleek, crystalline vessels arranged in a perfect defensive formation. Her heart stopped. She had emerged right in the middle of the legendary Zenith Empire's border patrol. The Zenith Empire was known throughout the galaxy for their technological superiority. Their ships were works of art, their weapons were unmatched, and their defensive systems were supposedly impenetrable. They had rebuffed every attempt at diplomatic contact from Earth, considering humans too primitive to warrant their attention. And Sarah had just crashed their perfect formation like a bowling ball through pins. "Oh shit," she muttered, watching as the crystalline ships scattered to avoid collision. Her antiquated human vessel's mass and momentum had forced them to break their carefully maintained positions. Through pure accident, she had just discovered something incredible. The Zenith ship's famous force fields didn't work against objects moving below a certain velocity. They had to physically move to avoid her tumbling ship. The comm system crackled to life with an angry transmission in the Zenith's musical language. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. She was in trouble. Big trouble. "This is Captain Chen of the Earth vessel Lucky Break," she transmitted back, trying to keep her voice steady. "Experiencing technical difficulties. Request assistance and apologize for any inconvenience." The response was immediate and harsh. Her universal translator managed to catch fragments. "Primitive vessel, protocol violation, and immediate surrender." Sarah's fingers danced across her backup navigation console as she pretended to comply. The Zenith ships were reforming their formation, this time with her vessel at the center. They clearly intended to escort her to one of their bases for detention and probably punishment. But Sarah had noticed something else during her ungraceful arrival. The Zenith ships moved with perfect precision, their formations mathematically exact. Almost predictable. Her primitive human navigation computer might be crashed, but she still had her manual controls. And she had spent her teenage years racing hovercars through the crowded skyways of New Shanghai. Initiating power-down sequence, she transmitted, while actually diverting power to her maneuvering thrusters. The Zenith ships drew closer, their formation tightening around her. Just a few more seconds. Sarah grinned and hit the thrusters at full power. The Lucky Break lurched forward, then spun in a manner that would have made a stunt pilot proud. The Zenith ships, locked into their precise formation, couldn't react fast enough. Their own predictability became their weakness as Sarah's chaotic maneuvers sent them scrambling once again. She punched in the coordinates for an emergency jump to hyperspace, praying her backup systems would hold together. As her ship prepared to jump, she sent one final transmission. "Thanks for the dance, folks. Sorry about the mess." The Lucky Break vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a formation of very confused and angry Zenith ships. Sarah let out a shaky laugh as she set course for the nearest human outpost. She had a feeling Earth Command would be very interested in her discovery about the Zenith Empire's defensive weaknesses. What she didn't know was that her accidental encounter had shattered more than just a formation. She had broken the Zenith Empire's aura of invincibility, and in doing so, had set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The Zenith High Command received the report of the incident with disbelief. Their perfect defense system, bypassed by a human cargo ship. Impossible. Yet the evidence was clear in the patrol ship's logs. Somewhere in the Empire's massive bureaucracy, an analysis eye began recalculating threat assessments. For the first time in centuries, it adjusted its variables to account for something new, human unpredictability. As Sarah docked at the outpost for repairs, she was already composing her report, encountered Zenith Patrol. Discovered critical weakness in defensive systems. Recommend immediate strategic review. She paused, then added with a smile. Also recommend dancing lessons for Zenith ship crews. The message would eventually reach Earth Command, where it would cause equal parts alarm and amusement. But more importantly, it would spark a realization. Sometimes the greatest advantage isn't superior technology or perfect precision, but the beautiful chaos of human improvisation. Little did anyone realize that this was just the beginning. The Zenith Empire's perfect order was about to meet humanity's creative chaos, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Zenith Empire's response to Sarah Chen's escape was swift and unprecedented. For the first time in their 5,000-year history, they issued a direct challenge to another species. Their message arrived at Earth Command on a crystal data shard, its surface etched with swirling patterns that seemed to mock human technology. Admiral Zhang read the translation aloud to the assembled Earth Command staff. To demonstrate the supremacy of Zenith technology and restore balance to the galaxy, we challenge your best pilot to navigate the maze of mirrors. Our champion will prove that your recent accident was merely that. Sarah, still dealing with the paperwork from her incident, found herself suddenly promoted from cargo captain to humanity's representative. She stared at the holographic display showing the maze of mirrors, an infamous asteroid field where crystalline formations reflected sensor signals, making traditional navigation nearly impossible. They're not trying to kill you, Admiral Zhang explained, studying Sarah's reaction. They're trying to humiliate us, to prove that your escape was luck, not skill. The question is, are you willing to prove them wrong? Sarah watched the simulation of Zenith ships gracefully weaving through the maze, their movements precise and beautiful. Sir, with all due respect, they're right about one thing. Our technology isn't as advanced as theirs. She grinned. But that might be exactly why we'll win. The next week found Sarah preparing the lucky break for the challenge. While Zenith officials watched with barely concealed disdain, she and her engineering team worked on what they dubbed Project Retro, stripping out most of the ship's modern navigation systems. You're removing your sensors. The Zenith observer, first light of dawn, asked in disbelief. How will you navigate? Sarah patted the old-fashioned manual controls she was installing. Sometimes the best way to avoid sensor confusion is to not use sensors at all. The day of the challenge arrived. The maze of mirrors glittered before them, a sprawling field of crystalline asteroids that turned every sensor reading into a kaleidoscope of false signals. The Zenith Champion ship, a sleek vessel named Perfect Calculation, hovered nearby. First light of dawn's voice came over the comm. The challenge is simple. First vessel to reach the beacon at the maze's center wins. This will demonstrate, once and for all, the superiority of proper navigational technology. Sarah flexed her fingers over her manual controls. She had spent the last week practicing something that had shocked her Zenith observers, flying blind. Ready when you are. The signal was given. The Zenith ship shot forward, its advanced sensors processing the countless reflected signals, its AI calculating optimal paths in microseconds. It was a display of technological perfection. Sarah took a different approach. She killed her sensors completely, relying only on basic visual input and the old-fashioned radar system she'd installed. Technology so primitive it was barely affected by the crystalline reflections. While the Zenith ship performed complex maneuvers to follow its calculated optimal path, Sarah simply flew. She treated the maze like the crowded skyways of home, reading the flow of space like she once read traffic patterns. Where the Zenith ship saw overwhelming data requiring constant recalculation, she saw a pattern, a rhythm. It wasn't precise or perfect, but it was real. Halfway through the maze, Sarah heard frustrated Zenith communications. Their champion was struggling, its sophisticated systems overwhelmed by the endless reflections. Each course correction required processing countless false readings, creating delays. Sarah, meanwhile, was in her element. She hummed an old racing tune as she wove through the crystals, her movements fluid and intuitive. The lucky break lived up to its name, scraping past obstacles with meters to spare, taking risks no eye would calculate as acceptable. She reached the center beacon 2 minutes ahead of perfect calculation. The silence on the comm channels was deafening. Then First Light of Dawn spoke, their musical voice containing an unfamiliar note: uncertainty. This is irregular. Your primitive approach should not have succeeded. That's the thing about humans, Sarah replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. We specialize in irregular. Sometimes the best technology isn't the newest, it's the one that works. As news of the victory spread, something unprecedented happened in the Zenith Empire. Questions began to emerge. If their supreme technology could be outperformed by a human using primitive methods, what else had they missed in their pursuit of perfection? Sarah's victory celebration was interrupted by an urgent message from Admiral Zhang. Well done, Captain, but we might have a situation. Since your win, we've detected unusual activity in the Empire. Their entire scientific council is in emergency session. They're not planning retaliation, are they? Sarah asked, concerned. No, Zhang replied, sounding puzzled. According to our sources, they're completely revising their assessment of human capabilities, and they're requesting all available information about what they call intuitive navigation techniques. Sarah leaned back in her pilot's seat, laughing softly. She had entered the race hoping to defend human pride. Instead, she might have just sparked a revolution in how the galaxy's most advanced civilization thought about progress. As she piloted the lucky break home, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The Zenith Empire had just learned that perfection sometimes lies in imperfection, and that wisdom could change everything. The Zenith Empire's first official diplomatic delegation to Earth arrived 3 weeks after the Maze of Mirrors incident. Their crystalline ship descended through Earth's atmosphere with mathematical precision, landing exactly on schedule at the new Shanghai spaceport. The welcoming committee, led by Admiral Zhang and a reluctant Sarah Chen, watched as the vessel's perfect geometric forms caught the morning sunlight. First Light of Dawn emerged first, followed by a team of Zenith scientists and diplomats. Their crystalline environmental suits sparkled, designed to protect them from what they considered Earth's chaotic atmospheric conditions. They approached with measured steps, each movement calculated to display their species' famous dignity. Then a pigeon pooped on First Light's suit. The resulting chaos nearly started an interstellar incident. The Zenith delegation's careful choreography dissolved into panic as they tried to deal with this unprecedented containment breach. Their environmental suits, it turned out, had no protocols for bird droppings. Sarah, fighting back laughter, stepped forward with a simple cleaning cloth. Here, she offered, sometimes the old ways work best. First Light stared at the cloth as if it might bite. This is primitive decontamination technology. We call it a handkerchief, Sarah replied, demonstrating its use. Sometimes simple solutions work better than complex ones. This small incident set the tone for what would become known as the Great Cultural Exchange. The Zenith delegation, despite their initial horror, found themselves fascinated by humanity's ability to thrive in what they saw as constant chaos. They were particularly baffled by human cities. Your transport routes appear random, one Zenith scientist complained, watching the flowing traffic of New Shanghai. There is no perfect pattern. Sarah, now officially assigned as their guide, shrugged. That's because they're not meant to be perfect. They're meant to be adaptable. The delegation struggled to process this concept. In their society, adaptability was secondary to perfection. Yet they couldn't deny the evidence before them. Humanity's chaotic systems worked, often better than their own carefully calculated ones. The real breakthrough came during an unplanned visit to Sarah's favorite noodle stand. The Zenith, despite their initial reluctance to eat algorithmically unpredictable food, were amazed by the vendor's ability to adjust each bowl's seasoning to individual tastes without any measuring devices. How does he achieve accuracy without quantum calculation? First Light asked, watching the vendor work. He doesn't, Sarah explained, enjoying her noodles. He goes by feel, by experience. Sometimes being approximately right is better than being exactly wrong. This simple statement caused such a stir among the Zenith that they had to call an emergency philosophical council session via quantum entanglement communicator. But the real test came when Earth's orbital control system suffered a critical failure during the delegation's visit. Thousands of vessels, from personal shuttles to cargo ships, suddenly lost their automated guidance. The Zenith watched in horror, expecting catastrophe. Instead, they witnessed something extraordinary. Human traffic controllers and pilots seamlessly switched to manual control, using decades-old backup systems and pure skill to keep everything moving. This should not work, First Light muttered, watching the seemingly chaotic but perfectly functional flow of traffic. There is no governing algorithm. The algorithm is human experience, Sarah replied. We plan for imperfection because we know it's inevitable. That's our strength. The delegation's report back to the Zenith Empire caused a sensation. For the first time in their history, the Empire had to consider that their pursuit of perfection might have become a limitation. Human adaptability, their primitive ability to function without perfect systems, represented something the Empire had lost long ago. But not everyone in the Empire welcomed these revelations. As Sarah and First Light worked to bridge their cultural gaps, reports arrived of a growing faction within the Empire that saw humanity's influence as a threat to their way of life. The Perfection Preservation Council, as they called themselves, argued that learning from humans would taint their society's purity. The situation came to a head during a cultural exchange demonstration at the spaceport. Sarah was showing a group of Zenith observers how humans could dock ships manually when proximity sensors detected multiple incoming vessels. Unscheduled arrivals, the control tower announced. Configuration matches Zenith military vessels. First Light's crystalline form flickered with alarm. The Preservation Council, they said. They would rather start a war than risk change. Sarah watched the approaching ships, their perfect formation familiar from her first encounter with the Empire. She smiled grimly. Well then, maybe it's time to show them why change isn't always a bad thing. As the hostile ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, Sarah realized that the real battle wasn't between humans and the Zenith Empire. It was between those who could adapt and those who refused to change. And she had a feeling that the next few hours would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of both civilizations. The Preservation Council's attack fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere in perfect geometric formation, their crystalline ships catching the sunlight like a constellation of artificial stars. Their arrival message was transmitted simultaneously to all frequencies. Submit to containment or face elimination. Chaos must not contaminate perfection. Sarah Chen stood in the spaceport's control tower, watching the approaching ships with First Light of Dawn at her side. The Zenith diplomat's crystalline form pulsed with distress patterns. Their formation is the absolute dominance configuration. It has never failed in 5,000 years of imperial warfare. Never failed against opponents who play by their rules, Sarah corrected, already moving toward the exit. Admiral Zhang, how many pilots can we scramble? Most of our military vessels are at the outer system patrol, Zhang replied grimly. We have 14 ships ready, maybe 20 in an hour. They have 60. We don't need military ships, Sarah said, a plan forming in her mind. Get me every cargo pilot, shuttle jockey, and racing hotshot in range. And I need maintenance to pull something special from storage. First Light followed her through the corridors, their precise movements contrasting with her hurried pace. What are you planning? The Preservation Fleet's tactical computers can counter any known strategy. Sarah grinned. Exactly. They can counter known strategies. So let's give them something their computers have never seen. She reached the hangar and stopped in front of a tarp-covered shape. With a flourish, she pulled the cover away, revealing a battered atmospheric racing craft. Meet the Lucky Break Aya. That is, a sporting vessel, First Light observed, their tone suggesting they were questioning Sarah's sanity. Used to race it in the low-atmosphere circuits before joining the cargo routes, Sarah explained, running her hand along the craft's scratched hull. Perfect for what we need. Within 30 minutes, the strangest defense fleet in Earth's history assembled above New Shanghai. Cargo haulers flew alongside passenger shuttles, their pilots a mix of professionals and enthusiasts. Sarah's voice crackled over their shared frequency. Remember, folks, we're not trying to outgun them. We're going to outfly them. The preservation fleet commenced their attack exactly as their tactical computers prescribed. A perfect, geometric spread designed to trap and eliminate inferior forces. Their targeting systems locked onto the ragtag human fleet, expecting an easy victory. That's when Sarah gave the signal. Time to show them some real chaos. Pattern Omega. Pattern Omega, as it turned out, was no pattern at all. The human fleet exploded into motion, each ship flying according to their pilots' instincts and experience. Cargo haulers spun in maneuvers their designers never intended. Racing ships darted between enemy vessels, and shuttle pilots showed why they were considered the best improvisational flyers in the sector. The preservation fleet's perfect formation began to falter. Their tactical computers, programmed to predict and counter rational military strategies, found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of human flight styles. Their targeting systems depend on calculating probable flight paths. First Light explained from their position in Sarah's cockpit. But your pilots, there is no logic to predict. Sarah yanked the lucky brake eye through a series of impossible turns, leading a group of preservation ships into pursuing her. That's because we're not flying with logic, she said, grinning as she lined up her next move. We're flying with style. She cut her engines completely, a move that the Zenith computers classified as pilot error, letting her ship tumble end over end. The pursuing ships, trying to predict her trajectory, collided with each other as she reignited her engines and shot through the gap between them. Above the city, the battle transformed into something that looked more like a dance than warfare. Human pilots drew upon every trick, stunt, and crazy maneuver they'd ever attempted. Racing pilots treated the preservation ships like obstacles in a course. Cargo haulers used their bulky ships in ways that defied both physics and common sense. The preservation fleet's perfect formations dissolved into chaos as they tried to adapt. Their tactical computers, overwhelmed by the variety of human flight patterns, began to crash. Ships that had never operated without computational assistance suddenly found themselves forced to rely on their pilots' underdeveloped instincts. "This is impossible," the Preservation Council's commander transmitted. "Your inferior technology and random tactics cannot defeat perfection." "That's your problem right there," Sarah replied, leading another squadron of cargo ships through a series of synchronized barrel rolls that scattered the enemy formation. "You think we're trying to defeat perfection. We're not. We're showing you why perfection isn't always the answer." In the control tower, Admiral Zhang watched the battle's progress with First Light. The Zenith diplomat's crystalline form had shifted to a pattern that human specialists would later identify as wonder. "Your ships are outdated. Your tactics defy all strategic logic. Your pilots ignore basic flight safety protocols," First Light observed. And yet we're winning," Zhang finished, unable to hide a smile. Sometimes the best way to handle an impossible situation is to do the impossible. As the battle reached its climax, Sarah realized that they weren't just fighting to defend Earth. They were fighting to prove a point that could change both civilizations. True strength lies not in achieving perfection, but in the ability to adapt, to improvise, and sometimes to embrace the beauty of imperfection. The Preservation Council's fleet hung in disarray above New Shanghai, their perfect formations shattered, their tactical computers overwhelmed. But Sarah knew this wasn't the end. The real challenge would be what came next, helping the Zenith Empire understand that their pursuit of perfection had become a prison, and that sometimes the best path forward requires letting go of certainty. The aftermath of the Battle of New Shanghai hung in the air like crystalline dust. The Preservation Council's defeated fleet hovered motionless, their perfect formations broken, their tactical computers still struggling to process what had happened. Below them, the ragtag human defense force maintained a loose, organic formation that seemed to shift and flow like a living thing. Sarah Chin's voice broke the tense silence. "So, who's ready to talk about embracing a little imperfection?" The response came not from the Preservation Fleet, but from First Light of Dawn. The Zenith diplomat's crystalline form vibrated with an emotion that their species rarely expressed. Laughter. The sound, musical and strange, transmitted across all frequencies. The effect was electric. Other Zenith began to join in, their crystalline forms resonating with this new experience. The sound built and spread, ship to ship, until the sky above New Shanghai rang with alien laughter. "What's happening?" Admiral Zhang demanded, watching the sensor readings spike. "They're laughing," Sarah replied, grinning. "I think they finally get the joke." The Preservation Council's commander's voice cut through the harmonics. "This is unprecedented. Our defeat, it makes no logical sense. It defies all tactical analysis." "Exactly," First Light responded, their voice still carrying traces of that strange laughter. "And that is precisely why we needed it. The pursuit of perfection had become our prison, preventing us from seeing other possibilities." Sarah guided the Lucky Break Aya alongside the commander's vessel. "You know what the real irony is? Your perfect society was built on adaptation. Your ancestors had to try new things, take risks, make mistakes. Somewhere along the way, you just forgot that perfection isn't a destination, it's a journey." The next few hours became known as the Great Recalculation. The Zenith, famous for their rigid adherence to protocol, did something unprecedented. They improvised. A joint Human-Zenith conference was hastily convened in the new Shanghai Spaceport's main hangar, with cargo crates serving as seats and a holographic projector balanced on an old fuel drum. The Preservation Council's representatives, their crystalline forms slightly dimmed with embarrassment, sat across from Earth's delegation. First Light acted as mediator, their forms still occasionally shimmering with suppressed laughter. "Perhaps," the Council's leader admitted, "we have been over-precise in our definitions of progress." Sarah, still in her flight suit and smelling of ozone, leaned forward. "Look, nobody's saying you should abandon your pursuit of perfection. We're just suggesting that maybe there's more than one way to be perfect." A Zenith scientist, their crystalline pattern showing excitement, projected a series of calculations. Analysis of human flight patterns during the battle reveals a form of emergent order within chaos. It's beautiful in its own way. "Like jazz," Sarah suggested. When the Zenith looked confused, she explained, "Earth music where the beauty comes from improvisation within structure. Different every time, but always working together." The scientist's form literally brightened. "Yes, exactly. A perfect imperfection." The negotiations that followed would reshape both civilizations. The Zenith began establishing cultural exchange programs, sending their youngest members to study human adaptability while sharing their advanced technology. Earth's spaceports soon hosted crystalline ships practicing irregular flight patterns, while human pilots taught the art of intuitive navigation in the Empire's academies. But the real change came 6 months later, during the first joint Human-Zenith space race, through the maze of mirrors. Sarah watched from the commentary booth as ships of both species wove through the crystalline asteroids. Some flew with perfect precision, others with wild improvisation, and many with a blend of both styles. First Light, now Earth's official ambassador to the Empire, stood beside her. "You know what the best part is?" they said, their crystalline form shimmering with amusement. "Nobody can predict who's going to win." Sarah laughed. "That's what makes it perfect." The race became an annual event, symbolizing the new partnership between humans and the Zenith. Each year, the courses became more complex, combining sections that required both precision and improvisation. Ships of both species learned to adapt, to blend styles, to find beauty in the balance between order and chaos. The Zenith Empire still pursued perfection, but they had learned to redefine it. Their cities began to incorporate organic elements alongside geometric precision. Their art started exploring the beauty of controlled chaos, and their youngest generation grew up understanding that sometimes the most perfect solution is the one that leaves room for imperfection. As for Sarah Chen, she continued flying the Lucky Break II in races and exhibitions, often with First Light as her co-pilot. Together, they demonstrated that the greatest adventures happen when you're willing to break formation and try something new. The story of how human chaos defeated Zenith perfection became legend throughout the galaxy. But the real victory wasn't in the battle. It was in the laughter that followed. It was the moment when one of the galaxy's most rigid civilizations learned to laugh at itself, and in doing so, found a new kind of perfection. In the end, the greatest triumph of humanity wasn't proving the superiority of chaos over order, but showing that the most perfect system is one that has room for both. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the sound of human and Zenith laughter continues to echo, a perfect harmony of order and chaos, precision and improvisation. A reminder that sometimes the best way to reach the stars is to be willing to dance your way there.